Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. So the topic of this video is departing, the long journey. And in this video we're going to be talking about the actual flight itself. So from the time that you first get onto an aircraft in whatever your home country is up until you land here in the Philippines. And your experience is going to vary based on a bunch of different factors. So if you're coming from, say, Australia, where you've got a direct flight and it's not a very long flight here, you're not going to have to deal with quite as many of the issues that others will have. If you're coming from, say, the eastern United States, where you've got a lot of connecting flights, long flights, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for you. The other thing is it's going to depend on which airline are you taking. Some airlines are better quality than others. And what is your seating? If you've got the money for like first class, business class, you're going to have a much more luxurious, comfortable trip than if you're stuck in economy. So those different factors are going to apply. It also might depend on what time of year you travel, how many people are going to be crammed onto the aircraft, how busy are the airports, how long are your layovers. So all of these different factors are going to play an important part in your overall travel experience. Now, one thing I will say is that if you are somebody that does a lot of international travel, if you are experienced in this kind of thing, some of these tips might be a little bit more obvious and you're going to kind of, I'll skip this video. But there might still be some of these tips that prove useful information for you. If you haven't traveled a lot, if you've never left your country, then this is going to be some very useful information. This is mostly just tips and stuff. And I've got my notes here. So again, be prepared for a very long trip, just depending on your departure origin. So that's something to think about, is you might be sitting in an aircraft for 18 hours straight. So it can be kind of uncomfortable depending on your situation. One thing also is be aware of your layover times. A lot of these airports, you're going to be arriving in one terminal and departing in another terminal. And if you look at your layover and be like, excuse me, all right, I'm only going to be at this airport for 30 minutes. And you're going to be thinking, great, I can just get off one plane and hop on another one. But you have to be real careful, because some of these airports, when you arrive, you're going to have to go through to another terminal. You might have to pass through some security checkpoints or immigration, customs, or whatever, just depending on where you're going to be traveling through. Some of your flights, you might even be stuck having to pick up your baggage because you're transferring from one airline to another. So you've got to go grab your bags, go to another terminal with your bags, check in your bags again. It just depends on how your flight is set up. But you want to make sure that your layovers have enough time for you to get from your terminal that you arrive at to the terminal you're departing from without the hassle. I can recall many times that I've had these international flights where you've got to make sure you get on that next flight, or it can screw the whole trip up. And you're literally running from your arrival terminal to your destination to make sure you catch that next flight on time. So give yourself just enough time to make sure that you actually are going to be able to catch the connecting flight without the hassle. But you don't want to be stuck on a layover that's 12 hours long. You don't want to be sitting in an airport for an extended period of time. If you've got the money and you're interested in doing a little bit of the touristy type thing, you can get it so that you arrive one day and maybe you fly out the next. That gives you a little bit of time to leave the airport, go and stay in a hotel, check some stuff out. But we're going to be focused mostly on just the direct flights. One thing is dress comfortably, because you're going to be on this for the long haul. You need to be aware that there are going to be a lot of temperature changes. So depending on where you're leaving, if it's very cold, your destination here in the Philippines is probably going to be much hotter, humid. When you're in the aircraft, temperatures can change. Obviously, you're going to be higher altitude, and that alone can cause the inside of the aircraft cabin to get a little bit cooler. It's not going to be cold. They have heaters, but the temperature could change. The other thing too is body heat. If you're packed in next to a bunch of people, just the radiant heat from those people can cause things to get a little bit warmer. If you're bundled up in a jacket or something like that, you can start to get a little bit warm. So make sure you're able to relax your clothing a bit, get some breathing, get some ventilation. The other thing is drink plenty of water before you get on your flight, during your flight, and after your flight. Unless you're coming from a very similar environment to here in the Philippines where it is hot and humid, your body's going to have to acclimate to the weather once you get here, and you need to make sure that you're staying hydrated because you're probably going to be sweating a bit when you arrive. Doesn't matter if it's day or night, it's going to be hot. Depending on where you're coming from, if you're not used to that, it's a good idea to start drinking water, getting hydrated before the long flight. The flight itself, yeah, you might be able to get a couple in-flight drinks. Might be a can of Coke or a beer. That's fine, but you also still want to make sure you're drinking water. You don't want to have any issues with that. Another thing is try not to eat heavy meals before you get on the flight. You might be sitting in an airport terminal for 4 hours and you're like, oh look, there's a nice restaurant, I'm going to go eat. You got to think about it though, you're going to be on an airplane for 12 plus hours possibly. And the restrooms in aircraft are not the most comfortable or the convenient. You don't want to have to be sitting on a plane and you've got diarrhea and you got to get up and run to the bathroom every couple minutes. So before you even get on that flight, pay attention to what you're eating and how much you're eating. My recommendation is eat a light meal, something that's going to be filling you up but not causing you gastro stress. Basically, you don't want something that's going to cause a lot of gas. You don't want to be farting and pissing off a lot of the other people in the aircraft. You don't want to have to be making trips to the toilet. Usually the food on the better airlines, it's not going to be that bad on your stomach or anything, but just be aware of that. You don't want to have to keep making trips to the restroom. Another thing is most aircraft nowadays, the in-flight entertainment system you have in front of you that's got like a TV screen and stuff so you can watch in-flight movies or whatever, those will usually now have a USB plug so you can plug in your USB charger to your cell phone. If you're going to be using your cell phone, obviously you're not going to be using the cellular data portion of it. You need to put it on airplane mode, but a lot of the airplanes will have Wi-Fi available. Most of them that I've been on, they will charge you Wi-Fi access, but you can still have Wi-Fi so you're able to browse the news, watch YouTube, communicate with people on the ground, stuff like that. But typically you might just be using it to read. You might have like a Kindle or something, you're reading a book. You can also pull out your laptop. If you've got a laptop or tablet, you can pull that out. But you need to be aware also that they're not going to have like your 3-prong standard plugs to power up your laptop. So if you're going to be using laptops or tablets, make sure that you're on low power mode, that you're using headsets so you don't disturb other people, and you're aware that you're going to have limited battery life. You're not going to be able to use your laptop during the entire flight. You don't want to kill your battery. When you get into different airports, if you have time, maybe you can find a plug where you can start charging your laptop, but it's not always available. Just be aware of that. The other thing is be patient. This is going to be a long process. This is, depending on where you're coming from, this could be a fairly lengthy flight. So, I mean, you could be looking at from your departure to your arrival with combined flights, the holdovers, layovers, and all this stuff. You could be looking easily at 30 to 40 hours total. So be prepared for that. Be patient. Sleep when you can, because it's my personal experience. When you're on a plane, it gets really boring. So typically when I'm on an aircraft, I sleep really well. So I just sleep most of the time on the plane. I'll get up and make sure I'm up for meals and stuff and checking on things. But a lot of the time you're going to be flying over the ocean. There's nothing below you to look at, just sleep. Enjoy the flight as best you can. Another thing is, if you are traveling alone, bring something to occupy your time. You might not have somebody sitting next to you that's very talkative. So if you're on a very long flight, if you're looking at 20-something hours for a flight, you're traveling alone, you don't have a wife, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, traveling with you. If you're coming over here alone, just bring something to occupy your time. Books, magazines, have some games loaded up on your phone or tablet that do not require internet access. Just have something there to occupy your time when you're not wanting to sleep. You can always watch some of the in-flight movies. Sometimes they're not so great. Sometimes they're pay-per-view. You got to pay an extra fee for that, just like the Wi-Fi. But you might be able to have some of those type of entertainment options. One other thing too is a lot of times you're going to see that wherever you're from, your time zone is going to be much different than it is here in the Philippines. You're not going to be used to the time difference, and that's what causes jet lag for people. Your body is still conditioned to the time zone you left from. Now you're coming to a completely different time zone where it could be 12, 16 hours difference. Your body is going to be wanting to sleep when everybody else is awake, and when everybody else is awake and doing stuff, that's when your body's wanting to sleep. My personal recommendation, something that I did, before you even travel, before you get on the flight, try and change your sleep schedule to match here in the Philippines. For some of you that might not be possible, it might not be convenient, but if you're able to do it, I would recommend you do it. That way you're already used to the time difference. When you get here, you're not going to be experiencing all of that jet lag. Your body's not having to adjust to the time differences. You're already on the time difference here. So for me, that was a big one that really helped, because when I got here, I wasn't tired, I wasn't sleepy. Not only because I slept on the flights, but you know, I had a very difficult transition, a different trip getting here. I'll explain that later if you haven't already watched before, but there's a lot of periods where I couldn't sleep. So just by changing my sleep schedule before I came here, when I got here, I was already in that groove. So when it was late at night, I was ready to go to sleep. And in the morning, I was ready to wake up and get to work doing my stuff, going around town. So really, that's what we're talking about as far as the journey. Personally, I can just say that, yeah, there's going to be a chance that it's going to be uncomfortable. You might be crowded into a seat. When you're picking your tickets, you want to try and get like a window seat or an aisle seat, just depending on your personal preference. But there's a good chance you're going to be on a very long flights, surrounded by people that don't smell good. They don't want to talk, or they talk too much. They're noisy. They're just, it's not going to be always a pleasant experience. You might have that kid sitting behind you that keeps wanting to kick the seat. You might have the kid in front of you that's wanting to always turn around and throw shit at you. So you got to be aware that this isn't going to be a great, wonderful experience at all times. Sometimes, especially on these long flights, you're going to have crying babies, and it's going to be one of those things where you want to sleep or you want to put in your headphones, listen to some music, but just be prepared that this is going to be a long trip, and it's going to try you. It's going to try your patience. Hopefully you've got good anger management skills at times, but just try and be relaxed and just realize you are now traveling to your new home. Take it in, because this possibly could be the last long flight that you take for a long time. So just enjoy the experience, make the most out of it, and you know, be prepared for what you're going to see when you get there. So hopefully this has been useful information. Thanks.